May it please the court, Mr. O'Brien, Ms. Colombo, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Judge Tony, this is opening statement. In most cases, evidence is presented in bits and pieces and not always in perfect chronological order. The opening statement is my opportunity to give you an overall picture, a roadmap, if you will, of what this case is about, so that you will understand the importance of each and every piece of evidence at the time that piece of evidence is presented. And in this case, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is going to show that back on the evening of March 20th, 2017, a little over a year ago, the defendant, William Knight, his daughter, and his son-in-law went on a repo mission to recover a stolen dirt bike. And as things would go, as expected, there was a disagreement over that bike. The defendant was armed, he was ready, and he subsequently took out a .357 revolver, pointed it, pulled the trigger, and fired a bullet into the head of Keith Johnson, causing his death. A dirt bike. A Yamaha YZ80 dirt bike. It was a dirt bike that was owned by Curtis Gill. Curtis Gill was the son-in-law of the defendant. And actually the dirt bike belonged to Curtis's son. And back in 2016, around February of 2016, before this incident occurred, the bike got stolen. And they made a report to the Acton Police Department about the bike. There was no word and nothing was heard about the bike for about 13 months. So we fast forward again to March of 2017. And Curtis Gill became aware that that dirt bike, his son's dirt bike, had been put up for sale. And it was put up for sale on an internet website associated with Facebook. And so Curtis Gill decided to go about the process of trying to retrieve the bike, contacting the seller, trying to arrange a meeting, and ultimately hoping to retain that bike. Now, the person who had put that bike on sale was a young man by the name of Justin Badgett. Justin did not own the bike. He had agreed to try to sell it for a friend, for an acquaintance of his, Keith Johnson. And the agreement was that Justin, if he was able to procure a buyer and have a successful sale, that he would get some money in return, about $100, like a commission for setting up the sale. Keith Johnson. As you've heard, Keith Johnson was a 24-year-old young man. He's a father, a son, a grandson. And he had a passion for things like dirt bikes and four-wheelers and things of that nature. And about 3 months prior to his death, he purchased that bike. Keith Johnson did not steal that dirt bike. He purchased that dirt bike about 3 months prior from his mother's neighbor's son. But he did know that it was a stolen dirt bike when he purchased it. And that was wrong. That was a mistake. But it was not a mistake that was worthy of him losing his life that day. And so when we talk about March 20th and the discussions that are going on, Justin telling Keith that he has a potential buyer, the hope was to go to 797 Danby to make a sale. 797 Danby being the residence that you just saw in the area you just saw. And that's not where Keith lived. Keith lived in an apartment. And so he kept the bike at his uncle's house, an individual by the name of Isaac Sprague. And that was at 797 Danby. They had no idea that the person who was expressing interest in selling and buying that bike was the true owner, the actual owner, Curtis Gill. Curtis Gill had seen pictures of that dirt bike online. He was convinced that it was his son's dirt bike, and he was correct. And so he went about doing whatever it would take to set up this meeting, using a false name, trying to do research about who was selling him the bike. And he also did the right thing. He contacted the Akron Police Department. And he told the Akron Police Department, hey, that dirt bike that I reported stolen about 13 months prior. I think I've located it now, and I want some help by the police. Night of March 20th, the police had a lot of calls, and they prioritized the calls as far as which ones they address first, which ones they go out to, and based upon the nature of this call, it was not a high priority. They were not able to immediately go out and meet with Curtis Gill. Curtis Gill was eager and anxious to get that bike. And although he hoped that the police were going to show up, he was willing to go forward for this meeting and not necessarily have the police present for everything that was going to go down, or have the police themselves take care of this, in which maybe there would never have been a meeting between Curtis Gill and Keith Johnson that night. Now, while Curtis was willing to go forward without the police being there, hoping they would be, he was not willing to go alone. He solicited the help of his wife, Michelle, and the defendant, William Knight. And they went over to that Dan Mead address in two different vehicles. Curtis Gill drove his black Ford truck. He went by himself, and he was in contact by telephone, with text and telephone, with his wife and the defendant, and they were in the defendant's red Chevy truck as they went over to Dan Mead Avenue. The defendant also had on his person concealed a loaded .357 revolver, loaded with 5 rounds. And this was not illegal, for the defendant had just recently obtained his CCW permit, his permit which allowed him to carry a concealed weapon. In fact, he specifically got that permit in January 2017, about 2 months prior. And so unlike your average citizen, he had the right and the privilege to go through everyday life with a loaded gun concealed on his person. Now, having a CCW permit can give you a sense of empowerment. Having a loaded gun, life and death, right there with you at all times. But with it also goes a huge responsibility not to abuse that power. And in addition to that loaded .357, he had additional ammunition. He had what's known as speed loaders, 2 of those speed loaders. And a speed loader for this type of revolver contains 5 bullets each. And the idea is that if you shoot every bullet in that revolver, you can put all 5 bullets immediately into that revolver. You don't have to waste time putting in one at a time. Speed loader, you put it all in one revolver and you're ready to go. And he had 2 of those. And those were also on his person and in the car as he headed to Dan Mead Avenue. So that kind of sets the stage for you. Party's heading to Dan Mead Avenue. It's getting dark out. It's about 9 o'clock that evening. And to kind of help you, I've mentioned some names for you. You're going to hear a lot of names throughout the course of this trial. But I want to give you a little visuals as to who some of these individuals are to help you remember them. Keith Johnson. Brandon Ward, good friend of Keith Johnson. And they went over to 797 Dan Mead together. The first meeting place between Justin and Curtis had been at a different location, and Keith Johnson and Brandon Ward and Keith's girlfriend pulled up 797 Dan Mead. The driveway's on the left-hand side, and they pulled up into that driveway. Justin Badgett, the middleman, the person who had set up this transaction, he drove in his green Civic, a Honda Civic, and pulled up in front of the house. And in that house, 797 is the home of Isaac Spradley. Keith's uncle, Mr. Spradley, was in his house, actually getting ready for bed when he started hearing some of the noise that was occurring. And he would look out his window and see much, if not most, of what occurred that night. Curtis Gill, he was in his black Ford truck. He had followed Justin Badgett to the area. And Michelle Gill, she was with her father, the defendant, in the red Chevy truck. Mr. Knight had pulled up, one of the last people to arrive, in the red Chevy truck, and when he came by the area where Curtis and Justin had parked, which was right in front of 797, he let Michelle out. Michelle got out of the car, and then the defendant drove down the road, turned around, and got into a tactical position, a couple houses down, facing everybody, parked right by the fire hydrant that was pointed out to you. And that is a picture when police were called as to where specifically his red Chevy truck was located. To help you out then, here's an overhead view. This is Dan Mead, the street that you were just on. When Justin Badgett pulled up, he parked here. Curtis Gill, in his black Ford truck, had followed him and parked. Trying to keep these colors straight.
Yeah, so put one thing at a time.
Gotcha. Parked right here. The defendant in his red truck parking in front of the fire hydrant. I'll keep making that same mistake now. Parked right here. Also important to note that there were two additional cars. Individuals who didn't have any association to either side, but these two cars were parked almost directly across the street, one after another, right across from Curtis's truck. So that kind of sets the scene as to where cars were parked, where people were located. And it was at this time that when Curtis is there and Keith is there, Keith decides to get the dirt bike out. It's behind his uncle's house. He brings it out. He drives up and down Dan Mead Avenue just to show that it works. He would then come over to that driveway area, and him and Curtis would start talking about the sale. They're in the driveway, they're in front of the vehicles. And at that time, Curtis took out his phone and had a little flashlight on his phone, and he checked the dirt bike, looking for the VIN number. He wanted verification that that was in fact his dirt bike. He got it. And at that point, he let the secret out. That this was in fact his dirt bike. He told Keith that it had been stolen, and now he wanted it back. So to Keith, he paid money for it 3 months earlier. He didn't want to just give it back to that company. He was resistant to that idea. He asked Curtis, what can you give me for it? Curtis was either unwilling or unable to give him any money. It's at this point, Justin Badgett decides, I'm getting out. He decided it was time to leave. One of the things that occurred while Justin was there is he realized he knew the Gills. Not only was he friends and associate with Keith Johnson, but he knew the Gills as well. And so with his green Civic, he pulled away. Keith Johnson also decided it was time to get out of it. He didn't want to give the bike back. Michelle, who was on the lawn in the close area, called 911. And so Keith decided that he was going to leave as well, started up the dirt bike, and intended to pull away. Curtis grabs the dirt bike, trying to stop him. Keith is able to pull away, and it's at this point that the defendant, William Knight, has exited his vehicle. He's in the road, he sees some of these activities, and he fires a warning shot in the air. He's about 25, 30 yards down the road. Keith just wanted to leave the scene, and he heard that gunshot, but in a panic, he lost control of the vehicle. And when he left the area from that driveway, he almost crashes right into these vehicles here. The light goes down. So now, Keith is down on the ground with the vehicle, and this is what happens next. Curtis Gill wants the bike. He's not giving up, wanting that bike, and he goes after it. Keith, he wants to just leave. He wants to get out of it. And so he doesn't stay on the ground, but he immediately gets up onto that dirt bike, tries to rev it. In doing so, the bike gets out of control, the wheel pops up from the front, his feet are on the ground. And the third thing that happened at this time is that the defendant, with his .357 revolver, doesn't fire another warning shot, never comes over to try to intercede in any discussions or to solve the problem, but it's at this time that he points his revolver straight ahead at Keith Johnson, aims for his chest, and ultimately hits him in the right temple. That bullet would go through his skull, would penetrate his brain, and he would go down immediately. No medical attention was going to help him. Keith Johnson died on the street of Danby. As I mentioned, Justin Badgett had left the scene. He actually had gone down the way toward what would be the dead end that you guys saw. We've had to circle back and go by everybody. So he didn't initially see the shooting. When he came back by, the shooting would have been accomplished, but he did not know exactly what was going on, and he left the scene. Everybody else, though, for the most part, remained. Police arrived. They began their investigation. They would find the defendant and his crew over by his red truck. The defendant had initially put the gun into his pocket, but upon talking to 911, put it down by a firearm. The police investigated, talked with witnesses. Ultimately, William Knight was charged in the death of Keith Johnson. Now, how do you know that the events of March 20th occurred as I just told them to you? Well, you will hear from multiple witnesses who were there and witnessed the events that evening. And to be clear, the events on Danby Avenue are very short. This is not a long amount of time in which these interactions occur. You will hear that when Curtis and Keith are discussing the sale of the bike or the ownership of that bike, there's no yelling, there's no threats, there's no physical confrontation. And in fact, once Keith actually starts up that dirt bike with the intent to get out of there, to leave, the shot that would take his life occurred a matter of seconds later. You will hear about the police investigation. We talked about that a little bit yesterday, and that patrol officers would arrive on the scene first, make contact with the parties. A unit known as the crime scene unit, we call them CSU, they come and they process the scene. So you will see pictures of the scene after the fact. You will see a video of the scene. And you will also hear from the lead investigator, kind of giving an overall picture of that investigation. Finally, you also hear a 911 call. For when Michelle Gill showed up, and was on that front lawn area, she called 911 when she learned that Keith wasn't willing just to give back the bike voluntarily. And she remained on that call throughout the shooting. So you will hear her narrative. You will hear Keith when he revs the engine up in an attempt to get out of it. You will hear the sounds from that dirt bike. And you will hear Michelle's reaction to what occurs and her description as to what occurs right then and there as it happened. And the defendant, William Knight, took over the phone. He got on the phone and talked to the 911 operator, and you will hear his voice, and you will hear him tell the 911 operator that the neighborhood is converging on the scene. He will admit that he aimed for the chest of Keith Johnson and shot. He will say he did so. His first statement that he did so is because Keith Johnson, or the person, is trying to kill his daughter. As the conversation proceeds, he will say, I did it because he tried to kill my daughter and my son-in-law. And as the conversation proceeds, he will then say, I did it because he tried to kill my daughter, my son-in-law, and he tried to kill me. A claim that the killing was justified because of self-defense. And as we told you yesterday, we heard a little bit about it today, claim of self-defense is for the defense to convince you. We have the burden of proof to the elements of the criminal charges, but it must be the defense who proves to you that this was an act of self-defense and that the killing of Keith Johnson was justified. I just want to quickly show you the charges. Those were discussed as well a little bit. We have 2 counts of murder, we have 2 counts of felonious assault. 2 different provisions of murder. One, as Mr. LaPrince told you yesterday, is the purposeful killing of another, that there was an intent to kill. The second murder, put in parentheses there, felony murder. That's not what it's called. It's called murder. But the basis of that charge is that he committed a serious offense, a first-degree felony, which would be felonious assault, and Keith Johnson died as a result. So that charge does not require an intent to kill. And felonious assault can be done one of 2 ways. If you use a deadly weapon and attempt to cause just physical harm, any kind of harm, that's felonious assault. And if you ultimately cause serious physical harm, whether you use a weapon or not, that is also felonious assault. And these crimes will be defined for you at the end of the case. I want to give you a little preview so when you're analyzing the evidence, you kind of know what to look for. And all 4 charges have what's called a firearm specification, that a gun was used in the commission of these offenses. Mr. LaPrince and I will return to you at the close of all that evidence, and we will ask that you find William Knight, the defendant, guilty of each and every one of those charges, all 4 charges. Because back on the night of March 20th, the defendant let that CCW permit get to his house. And although Keith Johnson was wrong for having a stolen dirt bike, having stolen property, he didn't deserve to die. And this killing, ladies and gentlemen, was not justified. It was not warranted by self-defense.